Hello and welcome to FitPros Live. You are in store for an educational and engaging session. Your instructor is live and able to answer questions that you drop in the chat. And we encourage you to respectfully interact with one another. Check your company's well-being portal for more live sessions this week. We are a community of wellness warriors. Now let's slay the day.
Hello and welcome. My name is Meyer Tapia, and I am a wellness coach and educator, hosting a lot of workshops like this, coaching people one-on-one in various aspects of well-being. And I also run a wellness program at Stanford University. So that's a little about me, but just want to warmly welcome you to 45 minutes that I hope can really be your time, your space to reflect, get clarity around who you are and what you want, as well as really ground in how to make that happen for yourself in your real life right now. I know when I log on to things like this in the middle of a work context, it can be kind of another box to check or multitasking all over the place. If you are able, I would warmly invite you to silence any notifications that you can, put your body in a comfortable space, just really kind of register for yourself, this is your time. I am not going to dive too much into my bio, but I just want to note, beyond the resume kind of bio, really the reason why I do this work and teach these kinds of things boils down to the stuff that's not on the resume or not in the pictures, the real challenges of daily life in my own personal family and home and body, as well as this larger community and world that we are all so connected to and feel on so many levels. And this topic, these things we'll be talking about today are really personal to me as well. And it's important to me that all of what we talk about is relevant and applicable to real life right here, not the hypothetically perfect lives where we're happy and free and have all the time and energy in the world to make positive change. But these lives right now, as they are, what does it look like to, first of all, identify what change we may want to make? Notice that I made sure this was titled Authentic Change, but also how we enact that in a way that makes sense for us. So we're going to start this whole conversation with an acknowledgement of why change can be hard. Spoiler alert, it's not because we're terrible people, lacking motivation or willpower or whatever. And really look at the power of our own mindsets in creating change in our life. And this really bleeds into an understanding of mindfulness and acceptance, and ultimately the importance of telling ourselves the truth about who we are, the truth about what we want, and the truth about what's going to help us get there, not help a person. What is the way to change, but what is my way? Really looking at how we can craft some shifts in our life that really stick because we want them to, not because they're supposed to. So that's my vision for this time. And I'm really curious what kinds of things you might be bringing in to this workshop. Obviously, we're not all there together live. I'm recording this ahead of time for you. But for those of you who are there together live, you might want to share in the chat what you might be thinking about changing in your life. And that also might feel wildly personal and like way too much to share, and that's fine. You might just write it down for yourself. But I would love for you to have kind of a concrete application along the way as we go here that you can be referring back to and really working with and playing with as we present some different ideas of what is important to you in your own life to make some adjustments around right now, whether it's like a physical behavior or an emotional or mental thought pattern that you hold. what would feel good for you to adjust in some way. And that might mean starting something. It also might mean stopping something. It might just mean doing something differently. So keeping this broad, but also making it personal. So why change is hard. We do what we've always done by nature because that's how brains work. So the science of habit really comes down to this idea of neuroplasticity, which I imagine many of you are familiar with already. But it's the biology of our brains, the reality that whenever we perform a certain behavior or even think a thought or access a feeling, there's a neural pathway in our brain associated with that thought or action or feeling that every time we go there, that neural pathway gets stronger. It actually gets thicker. So it's really easy to travel. It's like a superhighway in comparison to a wild meadow with no trail, and you have to blaze that trail. That's what it's like the first time we do behaviors, is we're kind of in the middle of nowhere with no familiarity, and we just have to like think a lot and put a lot of effort, endure a lot of discomfort to blaze that trail. But then when we walk that path enough times, it starts to become familiar. And so there's less mental energy required to access that trail. Eventually, over enough times of walking that path, we don't have to think about it at all. It's automatic. That neural pathway in our brain has been traveled enough times that it's effortless to go there. So when we access these neural pathways, we strengthen them. And when we don't access these neural pathways, we weaken them. That's all a fancy way of saying what we practice grows stronger. What we don't practice grows weaker. I am great at anxiety because I have practiced anxiety my whole life. I have learned some tools to help with it. I take Zoloft, that has helped a lot. I meditate, and I'm still extremely practiced in it. And it's kind of automatic unless I really think about it. Some of us are great at criticizing ourselves or other people because we've spent our whole lives practicing criticism. Some of you are great at a sport or playing an instrument or a technical skill, speaking a language, something you've spent hours, maybe years, maybe a lifetime practicing. So doing anything new is going to feel unfamiliar, foreign, challenging, take a lot of mental energy. And that does not mean that the change is the wrong change. It just means this is a new thing. So it's interesting how with stuff like learning a language or learning how to play an instrument, this is obvious. We get it. Like I would not expect to pick up an instrument I've never played and take one lesson and suddenly play beautiful music. I expect that I will be practicing and practicing for months and doing the stupid little drills and it not sounding at all like music until eventually, with enough practice, it sounds like music. I don't expect to take one lesson in Mandarin and suddenly be able to speak the language fluently. I expect to do all kinds of practice before I can speak fluently. And yet with other things like compassion or mindfulness or eating more vegetables or going to bed at a different time, we think that we can just tell ourselves we're going to do that and then we'll do it. As if all those years of practicing a different way of being don't count, and suddenly this entirely new way of doing a thing is going to be easy. Of course not. It is extremely rare that a person changes their sleeping routine or changes their eating routine or stops shopping online and they don't even have to think about it. No problem. Most of us, most of the time, really have to find ways to remind ourselves that we're doing things differently. and often try and fail at a few different approaches before we find what's going to actually work. So this may seem kind of commonsensical, but also we just kind of need to name that sometimes unrealistic expectation we hold that change is a matter of willpower, change is a matter of being a motivated person, and acknowledge that change almost never feels instantly resonant. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means it's new. And that whatever it is we're wanting to strengthen in ourselves requires some practice. So let's talk a little bit about mindset, how we think about these things we might be changing. I like to say that our thoughts and feelings about our thoughts and feelings really magnify our thoughts and feelings. They greatly impact and can enhance our thoughts and feelings. So if I'm feeling shame and guilt, and then I feel shame and guilt for feeling the shame and guilt, I feel even more shame and guilt, that kind of thing. The way we view what we're doing can have a huge impact on what we get out of that behavior. So let me speak less vaguely and give you a couple examples here. There's a mindset researcher at Stanford. Her name is Aaliyah Crum, and she's done so many different studies on mindset, but just a couple that I think are incredibly illustrative to this point. One was the first study she conducted in this area. This was her doctoral research study when she was at Yale, when she interviewed a bunch of women who worked in hospitality at hotels and asked if they get exercise in their daily life. And the women said, no, I don't have time to exercise. I'm working, I'm taking care of my family. And they did some biometric measures, looked at the women's body mass index, which another topic may not be the most accurate thing to look at in regard to health, but got some numbers around blood pressure, heart rate, weight. And then what she did was keep a control group who got no new information, but then had an experiment group of these women with whom she sat down for just a half an hour and gave a brief presentation that illustrated how they do, in fact, exercise. These women are on their feet all day long. They're doing laundry, they're changing mattresses out, they're cleaning bathrooms, they're walking up and down stairs. She showed them how many calories that they were burning, just gave them that information. And came back 8 weeks later and did some surveys and took some measurements again. And in 8 weeks' time, the control group was the same, but the women who'd been told that they were exercising in their daily life had lost a statistically significant amount of weight. Their blood pressure was lower, and they reported a higher job satisfaction and quality of life, which was incredibly interesting given that she didn't do any other intervention other than shift their mindset about how they thought about work. And she wondered, is it possible that just thinking they were getting exercise actually changed their bodies? And of course, she could improve that. Like, most likely, these women weren't going out and joining a gym or changing anything about their daily life or eating habits, but who knows? So that led her to do this milkshake study later, where she invited college students to come drink a milkshake. And half the students were given this milkshake with a poster behind it that had all of the nutritional information, and it was marketed as this, super indulgent, you deserve it, you've been working hard, amazing milkshake that of course had full fat everything and chocolate and whipped cream and cherries and nuts. It had the breakdown of the calories and the fat content and all of this. And then half of the students were given this milkshake in front of a poster that said, this is a diet milkshake, this really low calorie, fat-free, sugar-free, all the things. And she wanted to know how much of the milkshakes people were drinking, but she also wanted to move beyond any kind of subjective self-report to say what's happening in their bodies. So she took blood samples from these students to measure a hormone called ghrelin, which is associated with satiety. How satisfied and full am I? So what she found was the students who were drinking the full fat, indulgent, high calorie milkshake were drinking less of it before they reached that point of satiety and said, I am good. This was amazing. I can't even finish it. And then the students who were drinking the fat-free, sugar-free diet milkshake drank the whole thing and wanted more. They reported lower satiety. They were not at all satisfied. And then at the end of the day, she reveals, of course, that they were all drinking the same milkshake. There was no difference in what they were taking into their bodies, but there was a difference in their mindset. One group is thinking, I'm drinking this indulgent thing, and the other group is thinking, I am being deprived. And not only was how much they ate different, but the hormone levels in their body were different. This was the first study that really connected a difference in hormone levels in the body purely from a change in mindset. So all this to say that how we think about what we are doing has an impact on how our bodies metabolize what we're doing, how we experience what we're doing. So how do we apply this to any kind of change we might be thinking about making? The difference between an indulgence mindset and a deprivation mindset is huge and can actually impact how our bodies are responding to what we're doing. This is what I just said. Our thoughts and our feelings about our thoughts and our feelings amplify our thoughts and feelings. So what kind of a mindset do we want to hold around these changes that we make? What kind of mindset do we want to amplify? Do we want to feel more fulfilled and satisfied? Do we want to feel like we're not getting enough, we're not doing enough, right? Of course, we want to feel more fulfilled. So how do we approach what we're doing from a space of, this is for me, and this is mine, and this is making me more of who I want to be? So that may shift the kind of changes that you're thinking about making, because if the kind of change you're thinking about making is not even really your idea or that close to your heart, it's more of a change that you've just been told you should make or society tells you should make. We're going to dip into this a bit more before we close. You know, the awareness around what's my change to make versus what's the quote right change to make. Because I'm not going to feel an abundance and fulfillment mindset around making a change that I don't even really want to make, or that I'm not even ready to make right now. So part of this comes down to mindfulness, the ability to actually pay attention to what I want and need in this moment. Mindfulness is a broader state of being aware in this present moment with less judgment, more openness or kindness or curiosity, or even if those words feel not as accessible, it's like a neutral awareness, as in I'm not moralizing everything and deciding it's good, bad, right, wrong. I'm just noticing what's here. I'm seeing it clearly. So broadly speaking, this is, what it is to move through the world mindfully, is to be kind of more neutral and open and curious and see clearly where we are. In relation to behavior change, this is the state of, in this moment, in this aspect of my life, as things are right now, what is true? What do I want? What do I need? When we pay attention without judgment, we're able to see the impact of what we're currently doing and continue to choose to move toward what actually feels good and serves us well. So some years ago, I did a pilot study at Stanford where I was curious about people wanting to make changes in their life. And what if we spent less time talking about the actual changes they were making and more time talking about mindfulness, practicing mindfulness? Because my hunch was whatever the change is, if I'm practicing non-judgmental awareness in my day-to-day life, I'm going to notice how I feel when I do certain things, when I don't do other things. And ultimately, I'm going to gravitate toward what feels good, because that is to be human, right? We want to feel good. That's the motivation behind almost everything we do. And I had people in this study across the board, some people wanting to lose weight, some people wanting to quit smoking, some people wanting to shift their shopping habits, their sleeping habits, all kinds of different things. And I did find this to be true, that often what happens is we do a behavior we don't want to do, like, oh, I just spent $100 again on something I don't need, or I just ate this thing I didn't want to eat, or I just smoked again, or whatever it is. And then there's this shame and guilt that feels so horrible. We then want to self-soothe with something that's going to give us instant relief or pleasure. So we go back to the thing because it does help momentarily to feel better, and that's all we want. And so it spirals and it spirals and it spirals. So what I did with these folks was for 8 weeks, we didn't talk about smoking or drinking or eating or exercise or shopping. We just practiced mindfulness. And what started to happen was folks who wanted to shift how they ate, they would eat the thing they didn't want to eat, and they would notice, this doesn't feel good. But instead of the shame and guilt, there was the neutral awareness of, this is just information. This doesn't feel good. Why would I want to feel like this again? More awareness next time they reach for the thing of, I'm not going to feel good if I go there. Gradually over time, moving toward what was genuinely, sustainably feeling good. Same thing with cigarettes. Instead of the shame and guilt, just the neutral awareness of, this isn't feeling good. I want to feel good. So this is not a quick hack by any means. To practice being a mindful person is a lifetime practice, because to be mindful is a way of living, not just like a thing to whip out for 5 minutes at a time here and there. So it's never perfected. None of us is perfectly mindful every minute of our lives, but we can be mindful for more moments than we otherwise were. We can be present and neutral and open in more moments than we otherwise would. And the more we start paying attention in that way, with kindness and compassion rather than judgment and shame, we're able to move toward things that actually do serve us well. So I talked earlier, about needing to be able to tell ourselves the truth about what we're doing, where we are, and where we want to be, and what we actually want. And so I just want to name that acceptance is not like, well, it just is what it is. I guess I have to accept it. It's not a passive surrender or agreeing with the way things are. And some things are absolutely unacceptable. So it's a tricky word. But ultimately, what we're talking about acceptance here, it's acknowledging what's true is true, accepting the reality, not condoning it or saying, whatever, I guess this is just how it's going to be, but accepting or acknowledging that this is how it is right now. My teacher often uses the Uber example, that we can't call an Uber to take us where we want to go if we don't tell them where we are now. And we may be embarrassed about where we are, ashamed of where we are, mad about where we are, but we still have to tell the truth about where we are if we want to get where we want to go. And I just love that illustration of, yeah, if I'm wanting to make X, Y, or Z change, because that's where I want to be, where am I starting from? Can I acknowledge that, again, with less of the shame and guilt about where I happen to find myself in this particular moment, and just name what's true is true. This is the reality of this moment. so that I can then take some steps in the direction I want to be. When I know where I am, I can choose where I want to go, and I can know how to get there. My apologies for the display, the animation thing being off here. I'm going to offer a few questions or prompts that I think are helpful in designing and even articulating the kind of habits that we may want to be establishing in this real life as we're living it right now that works for us. This question here is one of my favorites. What would make my past self proud and my future self grateful? I love this question because it really teases out self-indulgence versus true self-care and compassion. Because the self-indulgence is more like, I'm just going to smoke the cigarette or skip work today or go buy a bunch of stuff online or, whatever just immediately makes me feel good. And while there is a time and a place for doing the thing that immediately feels good, when we're talking about establishing habits, this question is not going to usually lead to those kinds of things, but it's going to lead to, what would younger me be so happy and proud to see that I'm doing with my life now? Younger me would be so glad to see that I have finally learned how to take some deep breaths in the morning before I look at my phone, or I have finally learned how to practice gratitude, or I have finally stopped buying things I don't need, or look at me, I'm cooking for myself now, right? Future me will be so grateful that I've established this habit. Future me will be so grateful that I've meditated every morning or that I'm taking a break at lunch instead of working straight through. Future me is going to be so glad I saved this money or started eating well in my 40s. This is the kind of question that can illuminate for us, who do I really want to be in 10, 15, 20 years? Who did I want to be? How do I align how I'm living right now with that vision and that voice that's inside myself? I think it's also really important to look at this question of what's bringing me comfort and pleasure or delight or peace or some kind of satisfaction in my daily life already. Because often when we think about habits and change, we're thinking about stuff that we should do differently, things we need to add into our lives. And that may be the case, but I guarantee there is already something in your life that's genuinely feeling good. Something you do every day that's a moment of nourishment. When you sit and pet your cat and sip your coffee in the morning, when you have dinner with a loved one, when you step outside, whatever it is, that those micro moments that just feed your soul a little bit. And often we miss those because our minds are somewhere else. This is coming back to the mindfulness again. I call it, for me, it's the hypothetical land of heartache, where I'm daydreaming and imagining all the things that could go wrong and lead to heartache. For some people, it's the hypothetical land of tragedy, the worst case scenario land, the place our mind wants to go chew on for a while. And if I can be present for those micro moments that are already nourishing, then without adding anything to my day or carving out any more time or doing things any differently, I'm receiving nourishment I might otherwise not get because I'm showing up for where it already is. Can I close my eyes and breathe in the smell of that coffee and take that first sip and feel my cat's fur under my hand and just take that little moment? It sounds so trite, and yet it's often not about giving more time, it's about giving more presence. I've been hearing that so much lately from different teachers in different ways, that the best way to give yourself more time is to be present. And suddenly time will stretch because you're here where you actually are. When we are thinking about adding things in, making changes, what do I need to integrate into my life in some way? Rather than thinking along the lines of what should I be doing that's kind of outside ourselves, listening for whatever messages, whatever blurbs might be on the front of a magazine or popping through my feed. In this moment, what would bring me some ease? What would make me feel good or safe or energized? This is going to be different for different people, and it's going to be different on different days. Sometimes I need coffee with a friend, and sometimes I need to be alone. Sometimes I need to take a walk, and sometimes I need to take a nap. Sometimes I need to go to bed early, and sometimes I need to stay up late and talk or read. So it's not about finding the right things to do as it is listening to ourselves, what's actually true, what's actually going to nourish me, what is future me going to be really grateful that I did. These are the kind of prompts that lead to the changes that are going to stick. So I said this earlier, what we practice grows stronger. What we're good at now, we've practiced. So what we want to be good at, we have to practice. And we learn the thing by doing the thing. There just is no behavior change hack. And bigger things like learning a language or learning to play an instrument, we have to do that thing a whole lot, and it does take a lot of time and commitment. But a lot of the changes that I think we're thinking about maybe aren't so time intensive, like a 5-minute meditation or a stretch break in the middle of the day, or cooking instead of ordering out, or just not clicking add to cart. That it's not hard to find the time for this. We know that we spend 5 minutes frittering away on all kinds of other things. So it's not that it's hard to find time, or that it's hard to just stand outside for 2 minutes and breathe. It's hard, legitimately hard, to do things differently than how we've done it before. What's hard is the energy required to make a different choice. So if I have always gone left at this intersection, I'm always going to go left at this intersection unless there's a blazing sign in front of my face that says we're going right now. So this is kind of the not so sexy, but practical, grounded stuff of, is it a sticky note? Is it a reminder on my calendar? Is it a picture that I put in a certain part of my house that catches my attention suddenly and reminds me, oh yeah, this is different? You know how you put a picture in your house and then eventually you stop seeing it unless you move it to a different wall, and then you see it and you're like, I love this. We have to catch our attention and change, give ourselves some kind of stimulus that says, this is different now. We're doing this differently now. Finding a way to remind yourself is the biggest part of actually making change. Well, one of the biggest parts. I'm going to give you the second biggest part in a minute. But the last thing I want to touch on along this theme of authentic change is knowing how you are wired, because we are not all motivated the same way. And that's why there is no easy, here's how to make a change in your life that any of us can offer. You may have heard of Gretchen Rubin. She's written a lot of different books and done podcasts and in this kind of space of happiness and change. One of the earlier things she did was create a framework called the 4 tendencies. There's a book, there's a website, there's a quiz. It's not a personality type thing, but it's kind of a motivational type thing, as in, what is your tendency around how you're motivated? And this work has been done a lot with physicians and patient compliance. You know, why they tell some patients to change their behaviors and they do, and then they tell other patients to change their behaviors and they don't. So really looking at these 4 common ways that people are motivated to make change and finding where you are in that so you can set yourself up for success. The most common one is the obliger. The obliger is motivated externally, as in, let's use the example of I'm going to start swimming 3 mornings a week. If I'm an obliger and I decide I'm going to start swimming 3 mornings a week, I will never swim unless I ask somebody to meet me there, or I tell people, I put it on social media, I tell a friend and have them check in with me. I have to say it out loud and involve some other people, or I'm never going to make the change. So if you are an obliger, as you're thinking about what you want to change in your life, make sure you tell somebody. Make sure you make a plan and put it on your calendar. Make sure that you have someone to check in with. On the flip side, if you're a rebel, and this is where I identify, don't put it on the calendar and don't make a lot of plans with other people because you will break them. The rebel is the minute we hear we should do something or we've committed to do something, we suddenly don't want to do it anymore. So if I tell you I'm going to meet you at the pool in the morning, I'm already thinking about how I can cancel. For the rebel, it really comes down to owning why I'm making the change. Because it can't be a should, it can't be something I have to show up for. But if I am wanting to swim, why am I wanting to swim? How do I want to feel? What's my motivation for this? I need to really own it and feel autonomy over how I do it. So I might not say that I'm going to swim every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. I might say I want to swim 3 times a week. So I have a little bit more fluidity around which days, what time of day, but ultimately at the end of the week, I want to have done this thing and I'm going to choose how I do it on my own timeline. The questioner is the person who needs to research, why is this of value? Why is this worth my time? Why is this a valid change to invest in? So they're going to look at goggles on the internet, and they're going to look at swimsuits on the internet, and they're going to look up some different training plans and what's the best time of day to swim and what's the best routine to have and what are the best drills to do and which are the best pools. And they will research and maybe never actually go to the pool. And for those of us inclined to question so much we never act, we also need to embrace this is who we are. And it's totally fine to want to gather more information before we decide to do something. But we need to boundary that questioning. So at a certain point, we make a decision with the best information that we have and we start. And remember that we're not married to that plan forever. So I give myself 2 weeks to do all the questioning, and then I'm just going to start with what I've got. And then if I need to adjust, I can adjust. Lastly, the upholder is motivated externally and internally. So if I'm an upholder and I say I'm going to swim Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 a.m., I will, just because I told myself I would. And if I told you I'm meeting you at the pool, I will, because I show up for what I've told you I'm going to do. And that sounds like a strength and an amazing person. It can be, but the shadow side is because the upholder will commit to everything or they'll follow through on everything they commit to, they better make real sure that they actually want to do the thing they've committed to, or they're going to end up with all these commitments they didn't want, and they're going to fulfill those commitments at their own demise, and they're going to build resentment. So if you are an upholder thinking about making change, give yourself a moment to really make sure this is a change you want to make. And it's a change you have the capacity to make. Because once you commit to it, you're going to do it. And you don't want to build resentment. You want to build a positive experience of change so that you can build on it. So I said that most important thing is remind yourself you're making this change. Second most important thing is how you talk about it. So this is my last point, maybe my favorite thing to talk about when we talk about change. I've taught a lot of behavior change courses at Stanford. I've coached a lot of people who've wanted to make changes in their lives. And over, I see that there are tips and tricks and tools that work for some people and not for other people. But at the end of the day, pretty universally, the thing that makes the most difference in making change is how people talk about it. I teach meditation. So often people will say to me, I know I really need to meditate more. I know I should learn how to do this. I have to meditate. And the shoulds and the supposed tos and the have tos are victim words. They're really disempowering, as in they imply there's some external voice telling you what you should and shouldn't do. And that doesn't exist. We craft that out of societal messages, our parents, what have you. But at the end of the day, if you're hearing you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and you're a rebel, again, suddenly you're not going to want to do it, even if it was your idea. If you're an obliger, you might do it because it's the right thing to do and you want to get your gold star, but then you realize no one's even really paying that much attention. No one really cares. I didn't even want to do this in the first place. This isn't my idea. It's not going to last. The truth is, there's very little in life that we have to do. Very little. There's so much we say we have to do. And if we think about it, I don't have to put gas in the gas tank. I just want my car to keep running. So I choose to put gas in my gas tank. I didn't have to show up to give this talk. I chose to because I value integrity and following through on commitments. I want to get paid. I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff, any number of reasons, but nobody made me. There are consequences to every choice we make, but we are making choices. So it's a very different thing to say, I should really meditate versus I'm choosing to meditate because I want to be a more present person. It's the difference between I shouldn't drink that and I'm choosing not to drink that because I want to feel good when I wake up in the morning. I shouldn't buy this. I'm choosing not to buy this because I want to save my money. You hear the difference in how empowering it is to acknowledge I am making a choice. And what I love about this framework is we don't have to lie to ourselves. We don't have to pretend we love the choice we're making. We can really be sassy about it and say, like, I want to stay up and scroll my phone. I'm choosing to put it down because I want to get enough sleep. I want to work through lunch. I'm choosing to step outside and get some fresh air because I want to be more balanced. As long as we can connect it to why we're making the choice, to what it means to us, and we acknowledge that it is a choice, we're so much more likely to follow through. So if this is a helpful framework for you, please take it. I'm going to put this slide up here as we prepare to close, so you have my info to follow up if you would like. My business is just my name, so it's sarahmeyertapia.com. And that's where you can get information about following up with me to talk more about your changes if you'd like. But there are also a bunch of free resources there, downloadable meditations, as well as a Zoom link to join meditation live, some essays on real messy life, all kinds of stuff there. So feel free to check that out if you wish. But wishing you all well as you navigate your changes that you genuinely desire, that future you will be glad you made, and to do that in ways that work for the unique person you are. Thank you. Take care.